Welcome to this week's episode of Biz Success in 15, where top experts share hot tips and strategies that you can implement in as little as 15 minutes to build your dream business. And now here's your host, the Visibility Whiz, Cindy J.
Hi, I'm Cindy J, the Visibility Whiz, and welcome to this episode of Biz Success in 15, where top experts share hot tips and strategies that you can implement in 15 minutes or less to build your business. And today our guest is Ian Foster. He helps heart-centered business owners and transformational leaders become empowered in the law so that they can create a safe space for clients, protect what they've worked so hard to build, and use their gifts to serve the world with confidence. Welcome, Ian. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Cindy. I really appreciate it.
And also, just so our audience knows, Ian is an attorney here in California, and he teaches heart-centered entrepreneurs how to use the law to their advantage. He says it a lot more elegantly than I do.
Right. I try to make the law an empowering tool rather than something that provokes anxiety.
Exactly. See, he says it much more elegantly than I do. So to begin with, Ian, before we start talking about the law in our businesses, can you share a personal or business challenge that you had to overcome in order to achieve your level of success?
Yeah, a big challenge for me when I got into this specialty. So the last, 4 or 5 years, I have all I do full time is serve heart-centered business owners. But I've been an attorney for going on 20 years, and being an attorney, we were not really taught how to market to heart-centered people. I mean, we were taught to market ourselves by scaring the crap out of people, basically. And then saying, hire me or you're in big trouble. It's going to cost you all this time, money, and everything. I've had to, it was a long road to try and get away from that, marketing technique that I was taught. Part of it is, if I push people with too much negative, and, it's the law, if I really want to, there's a lot of negative stuff I could dig into. It causes anxiety, it leads to denial, people shut down, and then the people who really need the help the most are the ones who are least likely to get it. And one thing I found in particular was that it was the people who are in the most risky niches who are also in the most denial about the help they needed. And then I would sort of take that burden on myself, like, oh my gosh, I'm doing such a bad job communicating that now these people are not getting help and they're going to get in trouble, they're going to lose their business, and now it's my fault. Right. So, I run a heart-centered business too. So I have empathy, I have compassion, I have a passion for service. And so then, of course, like a lot of us do, I would take that burden on myself. And then it's my fault these people are not getting help. It's my fault their business is shutting down. So then it's my fault that their clients are not getting the help they need. So I've had to do a lot of mindset work in getting past that and realizing that, people out there are independent actors. I can't control everything. As lawyers, we like to be in control of a lot. It's kind of one of the old adages in lawyers is don't ask somebody a question if you don't already know the answer to it, right? So we like as lawyers to be in control. I've had to learn to be okay with not being in control, with kind of going with the flow and, taking what the universe is willing to give me and let me do and where the universe wants to lead me. So I've learned how to communicate a lot better with people. That was a big challenge. And also just realizing that for myself, I don't want the law to be a negative thing. For me, the law is kind of an interesting, sexy subject, if you will. I enjoy it. I'm a bit of a nerd about the law. But I get for most folks, the law is not like that. It's complex, it's mysterious, it evokes anxiety, fear, all kinds of emotions. I don't want people to feel like that about the law, because if you really get the law properly, if you know how to use it to your advantage, then the law is not a brick wall that you run into. The law can be the wind at your back, the wind in your sails. It can be another tool in your toolkit to empower yourself and move your vision forward. So I want people to see the law like that. So I've started, that's how I started communicating the law is, once you understand the law is really, it's something that you can understand, first of all. If you are out there running a heart-centered business, if you're a coach, a transformational leader, a healer, a therapist, all kinds of, if you're really serving your clients from the heart, if you have a passion for it and you're running a business doing it, you have everything it takes to understand the law. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to go to law school to get it. You can get educated and learn this stuff with guidance from, someone like me who knows kind of the details and where to find the right stuff. And then with that guidance, you can do a lot of your own legal stuff. And we have some kitties saying hello on the video here. We may have them keep coming to say hi.
Yes. So, hello, kitties.
Hello, kitty. That's one of my twins.
You said something I think so powerful. You know, a lot of us always say, you know, we have to really work with our mindset, which mindset is so much of our business success. But I love that you said how you had to sort of even think about the way you marketed, because as an attorney, it was more out of fear. But on the flip side also, you know, we always hear all this negative stuff about attorneys. So how difficult was that for you to overcome? Just people even getting to where, hey, Ian's a little bit different. He's actually a heart-centered attorney. I mean, which has to be low in percentage-wise of all attorneys. So has it been difficult for you to get people to open up and trust you because of the false beliefs that we have about attorneys, let's say?
The perception, yeah. Well, I mean, perception is reality. And one of the old jokes that lawyers like to say is that 90% of attorneys make the rest of us look bad. So, you know, there's a lot of negative perception about attorneys. Unfortunately, a lot of it has been earned and justified, I hate to say. I am really trying to break the mold of what it means to be an attorney in terms of being heart-centered. For me, this is not about churning through the file and billable hours. Quite frankly, if I were in this to make millions, I would be working for a firm in a high-rise in downtown San Francisco. I would not be serving heart-centered entrepreneurs. I'm doing this because it's my passion. And service has always been my passion. Before I did this, I was an attorney for the government for over 15 years. And, you know, I made a decent living working for the government, but as an attorney for the government, you don't get rich. You're doing it because you believe in what you're doing. Right. So my whole career as an attorney has been doing something that I believed in, where I felt I was serving and making the world a better place and doing the right thing. So that's what it's been about for me. And I think, you know, certainly up front, if they hear the word attorney, people might have certain, you know, perceptions, misconceptions, you know, stereotypes that they think. Once they get to know me, I think they quickly realize that I'm kind of breaking the mold of what it means to be a lawyer.
Sometimes stereotypes really hurt us that way. And so to anybody listening, believe me, you're in for a huge treat, because I love everything that Ian does with heart-centered entrepreneurs for the law on the internet. Because a lot of you might think, hey, if I can just throw up any sort of privacy policy or do this or do that, and I'm fine. But Ian has experienced so much with the law. And I know you and I talked before, Ian. And so can you share some of the things that you see heart-centered entrepreneurs do that either break the line, that really aren't, that don't empower them with the law and might actually get them in trouble with the law?
Yeah, sure. And it's really unfortunate right now, and I hate to say it, but this is what's going on. It's never been more legally dangerous to be a heart-centered business owner than it is right now. There are forces out there that are coming after our industry from different directions, and it's sad. So my mission is to try and make sure it's never been easier for you to get empowered in the law, so that you don't become a target for those forces and you can serve confidently. But there are a few different ways that I see heart-centered business owners kind of blundering along just due to lack of knowledge in the law. And it's not anything nefarious. They're not trying to break the law. It's you don't know what you don't know, right? And so if you don't know what questions to ask, you don't know what the answers are, and you don't realize it. So one of the big areas has to do with licensing regulations. So we all understand that to be say a marriage and family therapist, you have to get a license. To be a psychologist, you have to have a license. To be an attorney, you have to have a license. To be a medical doctor, you have to have a license, right? Well, you don't have to have a license to be a coach or an alternative healer or transformational leader or transformation maker or anything like that. Those are not licensed professions, but that doesn't mean that those licensing laws don't apply to you. These licensing laws set up areas of defined activities that are reserved for people in certain licensed professions. And if you're not aware of what those legal definitions are, it's super easy to cross into them. If everybody thinks they know the difference between coaching and therapy. If you go on a Facebook group or email chain or blog, you'll find 100 people who, I know the difference between coaching and therapy, or I know the difference between healing and medicine. I know the difference between business coaching and legal advice, right? Everybody's sure that they know the difference. Legally speaking, You can throw all that out. None of it matters. Legally speaking, all that matters is how the state government defines the term. So the state government could say, you need a therapy license to fix toilets. Now, that may not make any sense, but if that's what they do, then you need a therapy license to fix toilets. Now, it's usually not that extreme, but the point I'm making is that the state government can define therapy however they want. They can define medicine however they want. And if you don't know how the government has set up that definition, then do you really know the difference between coaching and therapy or between healing and medicine? For legal purposes, you don't if you haven't read the definitions yourself. And so states are now investigating heart-centered businesses, actively investigating them to see, are they crossing the line into licensed therapy, licensed psychology, licensed medicine, all kinds of different stuff. And they're really cracking down on that. They're doing it through a few different ways. They might just come audit you and examine you, which is sort of the nice way of doing it, because then you have an opportunity at least to cooperate with them and defend yourself. One of the more worrying trends I'm seeing is state governments will now, they do undercover sting operations, for lack of a better term. So you'll hire a client, you have a client who hires you, and for 6 months you're serving this client, you're loving them, you're trying to help their lives get better. Then you find out, oh no, they're not a real client. They're an undercover examiner from the state, just gathering evidence on me. And by the time they come forward, it's too late. They've now gathered all this evidence to say that I have crossed the law and I'm now practicing therapy without a license, or I'm practicing dietetics without a license. I mean, there are any number of examples, right? And now they're just going to shut me down. And I've had no opportunity to cooperate with them and try and defend myself because they've now gathered all the evidence. They basically gave me a rope and let me hang myself with it. And it was all because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know the definition of therapy. I didn't know the definition of what a dietetics was or any other licensed profession. So I bumbled into it. So
how do you help your clients avoid this?
Well, one of the big ways is I teach you, first of all, how to do some of your own legal research. So, 20 plus years ago when I went to law school, legal research was a real bear. I mean, my law school, I went to a pretty good law school. It was a top tier school, but just our one school had a 6-story law library with millions of volumes and cabinets full of little cards to help you look up the books and cross-reference. It was awful. It took hours to look anything up. Nowadays, Google is your friend. You can, if you just know a few tips on how to enter the search terms, you can do your own legal research pretty quickly. So I teach people how to do their own legal research so that you can look up this stuff, for yourself, because there are tons of laws out there that apply that you might not realize it. And then what I work with you with is how do you do good faith compliance? If you read all the laws in all the states very literally and very broadly, it can almost sound like you're not allowed to do anything. I mean, when you read some of these laws, it's shocking. One of the classic examples I use is in the state of Wisconsin, they define licensed psychology to mean helping someone with their unconscious mindset. Well, what do coaches do if not help people with their unconscious mindset, right? So it's scary when you actually read the definitions and think, oh my gosh, I'm practicing psychology without a license or whatever it might be, right? So I teach you how to do good faith compliance. When we're talking about the law, unfortunately, there are limits. So we do have to talk about some things you cannot do, but then we quickly move through that into what can you do. You have gifts and talents, you have a passion for service, you have clients who need you, most importantly, who need your help, to make their lives better. So how can you serve them? How can we move past those cannots into the what can you do? How can you serve your clients while still complying in good faith so that if and when the state, and it's becoming more often that the state's going to come ask questions now, you can tell the state auditor, hey, look, I'm complying in good faith. I've looked up the laws. I've done these worksheets. I've examined my business. I've talked to an attorney. I've taken a course. These auditors from the state, they don't come in with this idea of, I'm going to shut you down. No, they're just trying to make sure you're complying with the law in good faith, right? They're normal folks. They have good days and bad days like everybody else. If you cooperate with them, if you show them what you're doing, that you're working on it, you stand a much better chance of being okay.
And so what are some things that you believe all heart-centered entrepreneurs need in place to even start being in compliance?
Well, you need good documents in place, right? So you need legal contracts between you and your client. You need contracts between you and your employees or contractors. You need documents between you and if you have affiliates or JV partners or content providers or collaborators. You need legal contracts in place between you and all that. You need your right disclaimers in place. You need your policies and procedures in place. So having all those documents in place are definitely a necessary thing, along with understanding that you have to know the law and perhaps modify the substance of your activity, because all the best documents in the world will not save you. For example, you can have all the documents in the world that say, I'm an alternative spiritual healer. I'm not practicing medicine. Everybody understands here that we're not practicing medicine. The client signs off of it. Everybody says, great, this is not licensed medical practice. But if you take a scalpel and cut somebody open, guess what? You're practicing medicine. No, man, and no disclaimer is going to save you from that. So you have to have all those documents in place and understand how you can comply in the actual substance of your business and how you interact with your clients.
I just love that you help people not be afraid of the law. And, we all say, everybody, we always go, knowledge is power, knowledge is power, knowledge is power. But whenever it comes to the law, we like to go.
Yeah. No, one thing I hear often when I get on the phone with folks is, hey, I'm afraid to even ask you a question because I don't even want to know the answer.
Right. So I absolutely love, how you help everybody. And I know that you have a 15-minute strategy that our listeners can implement to build their business. So I'm really anxious to hear what that is.
Sure. So here's something. Now, in the law, I will admit I had a hard time trying to narrow it down. Because there's a lot of things that you need to do. But I narrowed it down to one thing that you can do in 15 minutes that will really give you a lot of extra legal protection. And that is go into all of your legal contracts. And I don't just mean your contracts with your clients. Now, definitely, get out your contracts between you and your clients, but also contracts you have with other businesses, content providers, with your employees or whatever. And make sure that they have 2 simple provisions towards the end of the contract. And these are things you can write in 15 minutes, and then you just copy and paste it and make sure all your contracts have it. Because I've noticed that in heart-centered businesses, a lot of us use boilerplate we got from somewhere, free samples. Maybe we took a training course and they gave us sample contracts. And almost all the contracts I've looked at of my clients and potential clients, almost all of them are missing these 2 simple provisions that will go a long way to protecting you. First, it's called a severability clause. And a severability clause is exactly what it sounds like. It means you can sever off portions of your contract. So the default rule in the law is that if some paragraph in your contract is later found to be invalid or unenforceable for some reason, then the judge could throw out the entire contract. And now you've got the whole thing thrown out and you're starting from scratch. That's bad news. You don't want to do that just because of one little sentence of your contract was bad. And if your contract was not drafted or guided, or if you didn't learn properly from the right expert, from someone like me who specializes in this field, is super likely that there's some provision in your contract is invalid or unenforceable. And so it's likely then that the whole thing's going to get thrown out. So what you do is you add a severability clause at the end. And all you have to say is that if any provision in this contract is later determined to be invalid or unenforceable, then the rest of the contract will survive and remain in effect. Just write that in there. And then that makes sure that later on, when inevitably someone comes along, if your contract is not great quality, they find some invalid provision in it, they will just throw out that invalid provision and you keep the rest of the contract. So you need that. The second thing you want to write in is what we call an entire agreement clause, where it says that this contract between the parties this contract is the entire agreement between the parties, and that nothing outside of this contract has any effect, and that any verbal agreements have to be put in writing and signed by both of us to remain in effect. So what happens in contract law, there's a lot of misconceptions. You don't need a written document. You don't need pieces of paper. You don't need a notary or anything to have a valid contract. Verbal contracts are perfectly valid and binding if they have the necessary components of a contract in them. Mm-hmm. So what you don't want to happen is you have this nice written contract between you and your client. Later, you and the client agree on some verbal modification on the side, and that verbal modification becomes binding because it's still a verbal contract. But now, because it's not written down, you have no evidence of it. So let's say, you have a coaching package with someone, and the client calls you up and says, hey, I'd like to purchase an extra session from you and I'll pay you an extra $100 for it. And you say, okay, no problem. you have just made a verbal modification to your contract that's valid and binding. And so later on, you give them the extra session and they pay you $50. And you say, no, you said you were going to pay $100. And they say, no, I said I was going to pay you $50. Well, who's right? You have no way to prove who was right and wrong. You're basically stuck with the $50 there. So if you have this entire agreement paragraph in your contract that says that verbal modifications only take effect if they're written and signed by us, well, in that case, what happens is you and the client agree on the extra session for $100, and then you just put it in writing.
Mm-hmm.
You send them an email and you say, print this out and sign it. And then, okay, now you have a valid modification. And later on, if the client says, I only want to pay you $50, you have a piece of paper that says, no, look, you said you'd pay $100 and you signed off on it. And that can save you a whole lot of trouble later on too. So adding in that severability paragraph and that entire agreement paragraph, you can do that in 15 minutes. Just write it in your own words in plain English, and that's all you need there.
Speaking about signatures, now, what about electronic signatures? So even if I sent you the email saying, we agreed I'm going to do the extra session for $100, can they, even like in the email, just email back saying, I agreed to these terms, and then print their name in the email? Would that still be legally in writing? Or if they just have put a JPEG of their signature in the email document, is that still legally?
A JPEG of their signature would be perfectly fine. Or they could print it and sign it and take a picture and send it back to you. Digital signatures are a much more common thing nowadays. Mm-hmm. So like my educational programs, I don't send you, I don't send everyone in the group a physical piece of paper to sign off on. I have it when you buy into the program that there are detailed terms and conditions that you have to read, and you have to actually check off actively, I've read and agreed to them, before it lets you complete the purchase. So that becomes a valid digital signature. When I do have clients that I'm working one-on-one with, and I want you to sign an agreement, especially if I'm signing you up as like a client on my legal practice, right? Like we need to have a detailed attorney-client agreement in place. I email you a PDF, you print it out, sign it, take a picture, and send it back to me. Or you can use an online signing service, DocuSign, HelloSign. I think there are a few others, but digital signatures are still perfectly fine.
Okay, very, very good. And next, I know that you have a absolutely fantastic gift for our guests. So can you share what that is? Sure.
Yeah. Talking things that I'm sure it's good. So it's a legal primer. I love your language, Cindy. It's awesome. You're very flattering. It's great. Thank you. So it's a legal primer for heart-centered entrepreneurs, and it goes through a few categories of things that you need to be aware of. In the law, like I could have written an entire book. Maybe I will. People keep telling me I should. On things you need to know as a heart-centered entrepreneur. But I try to narrow it down to a few subjects that you could take action on quickly, because I don't want to overwhelm you, especially when you don't have me there to ask questions to and talk to. So I picked out 3 subjects, and in each subject I give you a handful of action items you can take. And that way it's something that you can read through, and in a couple hours you can take some action on it and at least improve your legal risk situation.
I love it. And so to our guests, you want to head on over to Biz Success in 15. That's the number IN and then the number 15.com/Ian, all lowercase IAN. So bizsuccessin15.com/Ian, and grab your free legal primer for heart-centered entrepreneurs and start getting knowledgeable, because knowledge is power, and you can be empowered by the law with Ian's advice and suggestions that he gives you. And so, Ian, do you have any parting words for our listeners?
I think I just want to emphasize that, look, I get it. There are plenty of subject matters that scare me and that produce anxiety in me because I'm not an expert at them. I don't understand. I don't know what I don't know. I don't even know what questions to ask. So there's nothing wrong if you think of the legal side of your business, if you think fear, anxiety, denial, if you think overwhelm, some of the terms I've heard people say are things like ARG or UG or oh no, or, it's totally fine to feel all that. It's perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with feeling what you feel. I would just say don't let those kind of emotions control you, though. If you make decisions based out of fear and anxiety, it's almost always going to be the wrong decision, unless you're running away from a lion in the forest. Okay, that's a fear-based decision. That's probably the right thing to do. But when it comes to building your business, serving your clients, fear-based decisions are almost always going to lead you in the wrong way. They're going to stop you from taking the action you need. So it's okay to feel that, acknowledge that, love that part of yourself. Don't get down on yourself for feeling fear and anxiety. It's okay. And then push through it. Say, thank you, thank you for pointing that out to me. I know I'm afraid. I get it. Thank you to that part of me who's trying to keep me safe. Now let's move on and grow and build the business and take the action I need.
I love it. So thank you very much for being my guest today, Ian. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you so much.
And to our listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, feel free to share it with your friends. Every heart-centered entrepreneur needs to listen to Ian. I 100% believe that. And definitely hop on over to bizsuccessin15.com/Ian, and you're going to find all links to that we've mentioned on today's show. You'll be able to re-listen to Ian's words of wisdom and catch up on past episodes. And while you're there, be sure to grab your free legal primer for heart-centered entrepreneurs. So big hugs, and be sure to tune in next week for another amazing guest. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Biz Success in 15. For all links mentioned in today's show and to watch or listen to previous episodes, visit bizsuccessin15.com. Thanks so much for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for another amazing guest.